Australia's vaccination rollout is underway in earnest. The Pfizer vaccination is being administered to frontline workers and elderly people. Most Australians will receive the AstraZeneca vaccine, which was created by scientists at Oxford University using cells from an aborted fetus. It's this method of production that's causing consternation for some Christians.
The Holy See in confirmation of the...
In a statement to The Drum, the Catholic Archbishop of Sydney, Anthony Fisher, said anyone who is concerned about the ethics of the AstraZeneca vaccine should be confident in requesting an alternative. But he adds that believers should also be confident in taking the jab if there is no alternative reasonably available. Sydney's Anglican Archbishop Glenn Davies shares these concerns. In a statement he said, "I was one of the church leaders who urged the Prime Minister to give Australians a choice in order to assure the highest vaccination rate possible. I welcome the fact that the Pfizer vaccine has been approved for distribution in Australia, since this vaccine is free from ethical concerns in its production." But infectious diseases expert Professor Peter Collignon says the Church's position is tricky.
At the moment it's problematic because there's a shortage of vaccines, so we don't have the luxury of being able to choose. For the next 6 months, at least in Australia and most in the world, I think we just have to accept what we're offered because that will be good at saving lives, causing less spread in the society and stopping people coming into hospital.
Ethicists say that Christians are bound by their religious beliefs, as well as their commitment to the broader community.
We've all been able to benefit from the sacrifices made by individuals who are remained in quarantine or have stayed in isolation when infected. That's fantastic. So what we need to think about is then, okay, when it comes my time, what can I do for my fellow citizen? So there might be a tension there that they need to think through. And it's not clear to me that one's religious obligations should actually trump, especially when the Vatican itself noted that if there aren't any other options, the AstraZeneca vaccine is fine.
You see how short of breath you are.
Professor Collignon wants Australians to mull over other ethical concerns, like the demand for vaccines overseas.
So we need to get a balance between looking after ourselves quite appropriately and the high-risk individuals, but then particularly when we're getting down to 20 and 30-year-olds, what do we do about our own people versus people in much higher dangers, particularly if they're in developing countries that lack finance and can't get vaccines because they don't manufacture them?
Now, Mary-Louise, some people are still confused about these fetal cell lines that are used to develop these vaccines and in a lot of medicine. Can you explain to us what they are?
So they're cells taken from aborted fetuses that normally replicate about 50 times. But then you'd run out of them very rapidly. So they've been genetically modified so that they continually replicate, so that vaccinologists can then use them to grow viruses in and make life-saving vaccines.
So this is decades. Those were taken how many decades ago?
Sometimes 40 to maybe 60 years ago.
Okay, and they're used widely throughout medical research?
Yes, widely.
And in a number of vaccines?
Yes, absolutely. Now, we haven't always told people what's in the vaccines because when measles, mumps and others were being made, no one actually thought to actually tell people how things were made. There wasn't the same sort of reliance on informed consent, and now we do have that. We actually have to tell people what they're made from so that they can make a decision.
Well, given what you've just explained about those fetal cell lines, and given that some of the church leaders have got hesitancy or anxiety around it, and asking people to try to choose another vaccine, do you think the government or the medical officers should have worked more closely with the religious leaders to just full stop?
Well, first of all, let me remind you that to get herd immunity, if AstraZeneca does give us long-term herd immunity, or at least for a season, to stop us from getting infection and transmitting it, we're going to need at least 75 to 80% of the population vaccinated. So if there's about 70% of Australians identify themselves as Christians, and let's say about 30-odd% are very conservative, why would you put in place a problem where they're going to have to choose the health of others and themselves and their family versus their religious beliefs?
But they're still saying take it. If you can't get the one that you want, you still take it for the greater good.
Yes. However, I'll give you an example. At WHO, we were doing a project looking at clean care saves lives and developing a recipe to make alcohol-based hand rub in a kitchen in a hospital in some low resource countries. And the Muslim community were very concerned that this was against the Quran. So WHO went to the trouble of getting Muslim infectious disease physicians and academics in the Quran to look into this, to find that in fact the Quran says that you can actually have medicines with alcohol that's made on the basis of alcohol and skin preparation. So they went to the trouble of explaining this through their religious leaders to their community, but they also had an opportunity to have a choice. So they could use hand hygiene with soap and water.
Right, okay.
So they need to be given a choice, and I'm surprised that they didn't have a consumer advocate there from many faiths, because we are a multi-faith country.